Now, the mechanics. So all of these were considerations. You want to, and we won't be doing these in necessarily this order as this project comes through, because usually the cover letter is going to be the last thing you're going to write. You want to, though, briefly introduce yourself in this letter and thank the museum or the gallery for taking the time to review the materials you are going to present. You also, in this cover letter, want to include a list, an itemized list of the materials they can expect to be reading in the packet you are submitting. So the reviewer of this packet knows what to expect. It's like having a table of contents within the letter. You want to let them know the contact information if they have questions, and also let them know that you will be contacting them with a follow-up call, maybe in a couple of weeks with a phone call via email. So you not only want to leave your contact information with them, you want to let them know that you plan to contact them within a certain span of time in order to get their reactions, their feedback. You've got the concept, and you want to start with a working title. That working title, you might say, is one of these first, if you've ever been to a place where they do archaeological digs, they have these screens that they sift dirt through where all the fine stuff drops through, and then whatever, it could be pottery sherds or arrowheads or whatever there is they're looking for, will stay on the top. Your working title is like one of those screens. Right? You want anything that's going to fit the exhibit to fit that title. So if you've got this working title, right, you want to know not only what is the title, but a subtitle. So generally you'll have the working title, a colon, and then a subtitle. So the working title, you might say, is the actual, the first part of the title they read, might be very, very general, but still active. And then the subtitle is even more specific. And if you don't have a working title for your proposal, think of one. Without a title, it makes it much more difficult for whoever's reading your proposal to actually pigeonhole, to frame your idea into something that they think will fit the venue within which they are operating. So if you don't have one, try hard to make one up. This is a time when you can ask your friends, what do you think? What would you call this? As you are describing the exhibit in the proposal, you want a brief description, 1 or 2 paragraphs of the show. This is going to be part of your proposal now, not the letter. This is part of the proposal. So, an example, I could say, Art in Hand, that's my working title, is an historic exhibition of vintage hand tools. What did I do? Because I could have said tools. How does vintage hand tools actually narrow and also make something more active and seem more important? What if I'd have said second-hand hand tools? Second-hand tools. What's that? Yeah, used, less than quality. And they were used. They're tools. But by calling them vintage as compared to secondhand, or I could have said old. What's the difference between old and antique? What's the difference between grime and patina? That's why when people look sometimes at my desk and they see a little layer of dust, and I'll say, don't touch that. That's patina, which is the surface that something acquires through human use or lack thereof. Same thing. You've just used a different word so people will see it differently. So vintage hand tools. Vintage implies they're old. But hand tools also narrows it, because they know with a vintage hand tool, they're not going to be looking at necessarily a jackhammer. They're not going to be looking at a steam shovel. Right? They may not be looking at a chainsaw. It's narrowing it. that were used in the early 20th century while New Mexico was still a United States territory. So I've not only narrowed the objects, but even given them a specific region. Because if I was to pitch this in New York, I promise you I would not be saying of what was used in New Mexico. But I'm making this specific to Santa Fe. The 20 pieces of New Mexican Americana. I could have just said stuff, objects. But Americana is one of those words where you just want to stand up and I pledge allegiance to the flag. Originally used to perform work, and in retrospect, this exhibit aims to show how we can appreciate the sculptural qualities in the tools themselves. So we're not looking at the work they did. The people who used them were actually looking at the tools themselves as works of art and appreciating. The coolest piece in the exhibit were these shoes that had spikes this tall on them. There were like 50 spikes to each shoe, and you would wear them to pit cherries. So there'd be cherries in a bin, and then you would put these shoes on, and you would go like this to get the cherry meat off of them. They were the coolest shoes, man. I would have loved those in the rock and roll bands I was in. I mean, they were cruel shoes, you know. Not cool, cruel. But we took a simple sigh, mounted it, and gave it the right light. And you saw the drama of that object. Not only by the object itself, its shadow. You walk in and you see it mounted and lit. It does shape perception. But along with it was taking the time to do the research on those objects, because most of the objects we could not actually determine who the artist was. You might have known the company if it was something that was commercially made, but in general, a lot of the tools were handmade. We don't know who made them. So we could not attribute a specific artist, although we could attribute specific use, media, and even where it was collected. Beyond that, we didn't have that kind of information. But we gave as much contextual information as we could, that someone knew not only what that object was, what it was used for, and even saw a way to hang it in a dramatic way. That was taking the familiar and making it strange. So you want to make sure in your description that you are able to find ways that, without being too much puffery, too much inflated language, show an engaging and innovative way to present these works not only to the museum but to the public. Then your curator statement. Usually it's going to be no more than a paragraph long. It's kind of a bio. It's recommended that you have one. The same way that artists are expected to produce an artist statement, a curator tells who you are as a curator, what are the themes that interest you most, what drives you, what makes you do what you want to do, what makes you unique as a curator. And when you produce a catalog for this exhibit, it's expected that you as the curator will have a statement that's associated with that exhibit. It may even be mounted as part of the exhibit, and it may be the first thing that people encounter with the title and subtitle as they walk into the exhibit. You also want to include in your proposal a rationale. Why is this venue appropriate? In this case, I'm going to make this easy for you. You are proposing the exhibit that you want to do to the Primitive Edge Gallery. So you already know it's going to go to Felipe and Jesse. You already know they are the ones who would be reading it.